All right. Welcome to the Attorney Lounge. Another episode today with Jennifer Doran from MoloLamken. Did I say that correctly?
MoloLamken, but we'll know what you're talking about. There isn't really any other firm out there that sounds like us. So
I've gotten sort of challenged on some of these law firms. I had one, Pogust Goodhead, and so I'm actually having I hate to start the show off by asking, did I say that correctly? But I want to make
no,
sure I get it right.
yeah, it was perfect. And at least nowadays there tend to be 1 to 2 names instead of 4 to 6 to 8. So
Yeah, for sure. Well, I've been kind of starting the show off a little bit with kind of some curveball questions. I have no idea if you follow basketball at all, but I did see that you went to Duke undergrad. So any predictions, Duke being obviously one of the premier basketball programs, any predictions between for the national championship game, which will be tonight. By the time this comes out, it'll be over. But Purdue versus UConn, any prediction for the game tonight?
I think that a lot of folks have their money on UConn, and it might be unwise to bet against them. But as a good Midwesterner and neighbor of Indiana, I'm going to have to say that I'm putting some chips in the Purdue basket. Let's see what happens. March Madness is all about, the unexpected, and, we're hoping for some excitement either way.
Yeah. I hope it's a good game, and Edie is obviously a stud, and it's very hard to repeat. I think maybe the last team that repeated might have been Duke.
Mhm. Gosh.
I
Yeah, I'll
can't even
have to check
remember
that
for sure,
stat, but
yeah,
I mean,
but
I was
so
there when we won in 2001, so that seems like a long time ago. But
yeah.
the last time we won, we played against my husband's team, so that kind of a sour subject.
Who was that? Who'd they play?
The Badgers, Wisconsin, so has divided over here.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, hopefully it's a good game. Did you go to the games? Were you a Duke crazy?
I went to a fair amount of games, but I did not camp out. And I don't know how many folks know about Krzyzewskiville, which is
Mhm.
basically the little tent city outside of Cameron Indoor Stadium, where it was a very formal tenting process to wait for tickets, especially if there were big games against Chapel Hill. And I remember my sophomore year, I was in a triple, which means very tiny, very small square footage room with 3 of us. And 2 of my roommates tented, which meant that if the moderators came and checked the tent anytime at night, 2 a.m., 4 a.m., if the right number of people weren't in there, they'd lose their spot for tickets. So I had a single for a while. It was kind of interesting. But I made it to my fair share of games, good energy.
Nice. I went to
Hmm.
a game there one time. I was the general counsel at Grand Canyon University, and we played at Duke. We got beat.
Oh.
I don't remember what the score was, but it was a great, really cool experience. We sat right behind the bench, the Grand Canyon bench. It was like bleachers, and then you walk around the corner, and there's a concession stand there in Cameron Indoor. There was like a high school game, but the environment in there was just incredible. It was one of these places I'd seen, kind of like going to Wrigley Field for the first time. It's like you've seen this place on TV a million times,
Mhm.
and so that experience of going to the game was really cool. I enjoyed that very much.
Oh, I'm glad you had a good time. It is fun, like the stomping, the noise, something about the acoustics in there. It's priceless. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun place. Okay, well, so a little bit about your background. That's typically how we start the show. Tell us a little bit about. We know you went to Duke, obviously now. So, but tell us a little bit about where you grew up and went to college, went to law school, and kind of how you navigated, ending up, in law school and becoming a lawyer in the first place.
Sure thing. Well, I was lucky to grow up in Morton Grove, Illinois, which some folks have not heard of, but it's a small suburb of Chicago, not far from Evanston. It's only about 11 miles from the city. And one of our claim to fame is we are the home of Pequot's Pizza. And just as of February 2024, Pequot's was listed as best pizza in the country by the Yelp elites. So if you happen to be in the
Wow.
neighborhood, go check it out.
Okay. All right. Look, you may know this name. My wife is from Hanover Park, Chicago, or a suburb of Chicago, similar. We're a big Lou Malnati's fan here. I don't know if you
Mhm.
know that one.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's a hot topic when people come to town, and my family's sort of half Illuminatis and half Giordano's, and I've been all by myself with the Pequods camp, but highly recommend. So for any folks who are listening and end up in Chicago, we got one in the city and we got one in Morton Grove. Go try it.
Very, very cool. I'll have to try that next
Mhm.
time I'm there. So growing up in Chicago, but you navigated to Duke undergrad, did you think did you want to go to Northwestern? Was that ever a consideration? Did you think about that?
I did look there, and I looked in the Northeast. I thought about Georgetown, and I went to visit Duke, and there are a couple things about it. So number one is the thing that we tell lawyers today that is the ultimate goal, which is have a work-life balance. So when I went to Duke, I was pretty impressed that, it has very rigorous academic programs, but people also had the school spirit and they were really interested in the arts. And
Mhm,
obviously there was some sports, but I wasn't a major athlete. I wasn't going to be playing basketball there or anything, but
mhm.
I learned about their public policy studies major, which a lot of schools don't have. And so for anyone who's thinking about looking at that major at various schools, it is pretty interdisciplinary, combining political science and economics and law and ethics. And, pretty much all the different majors that I thought I might go into somewhere was in one neat little package at Duke. And so that was really appealing to me. Of course, once I got there, I also double majored in English because school credit for joining a book club. I mean, that sounds pretty great, right? I mean, I like to read a lot. So, what I didn't know, people thought, oh, that'll be great if you're thinking about law school, but it's sort of shooting yourself in the foot a little bit because everything I learned and developed as an English major, I had to unlearn when I went to law school. I, was an incredibly florid writer. I used a lot of adjectives. I was trying to set stages and scenes and make things come to life. And then in law school, from day one, the message from I'll never forget one of my professors, was get to the point, cut the chaff. So instead of saying, it became clear to the room that the young gentleman, despite his confidence, was mistaken in his position, you just write in a brief, he was wrong. He was wrong. You probably have a page limit. And the court wants to know that you're confident in your facts and your law and not on how many flowery descriptions you can integrate. So that was
Yeah,
kind of a funny thing I learned.
that makes sense, I mean, it's get to the point, very practical writing, quickly sort of outline the issue, get to the point. So that's, not as much fun. Not as much fun as writing for, an English class for sure. Um, but
Yeah,
at what
it's
point
very different. Mhm.
no, I was gonna say, so, like, at what point in that process did you know when you went to Duke that you ultimately wanted to go to law school, or did you sort of discover that as an interest while you were there?
So that was definitely an evolving process. For me, law school tuition was not a small commitment to consider. So for
Mm,
folks who said, "I'll try it for a year, and if I don't like it, I'll just change path," and that was not an option for me. If I was going to commit to that, I wanted it to really be, you know, the right choice. So, um, I would say I thought about the skills that I had been uh, developing, and it's reading and getting to the truth of the information, and I thought I want to be working with words and crafting words. And my mom was actually a chemist and microbiologist, so when I was really little, I thought, oh, am I going to be in a lab coat and glasses and do the math and science thing? And I thought, no. Once I got older, I wanted to live with words and people, and I thought about going into like marketing, advertising, PR, or law school. So one thing that was great was I spent 2 years in a program for college graduates, just came out of good school, thinking about law school, and kind of like Franklin and Ellis has their PA program. This was a mid-sized Atlanta firm, and it was called their caseworker program. And what was really strange about it is I pretty much was doing back then what a discovery specialist does now, but just with the old technology. And some of the work we were doing is what a lot of bigger firms are having even their young associates do. So I felt like I really got a good peek at, is this life for me once I've seen it, behind the scenes, how the sausage is made.
mm,
When I was considering going to Duke, I had an interview from someone at a big firm in Chicago, just kind of an alumni interview, and they they were a tax lawyer, and they were in the wrong spot because they told me, whatever you do, don't go to law school, don't become a lawyer, like I've sold my soul. And I thought, oh gosh, that's like really disappointing.
yeah, that doesn't sound
um
so good.
Yeah, and I knew that the law wasn't gonna be what you've seen in Suits or in my day Law& and Order or,
Mhm.
I knew that there would be a lot of long nights and hard work, but then once I went to the firm, for these 2 years, I thought that it was so much fun to be on the sleuthing side of things. And so by this, I mean, we would receive documents from the other side. You would need someone with a law license to review for privilege if it was documents that, our firm was producing. But because these were coming in, they were letting us get our hands in there and trying to see what was hot in there, what was worth using to build our case or our defenses. And this was back in the day when we didn't have coding panels. We had red flags for a hot doc and blue flags for an issue and green flags for a good doc. And then we'd send them off to a vendor and say, give me a binder of just the blue flags and the red flags. And,
Yep.
we had so much fun reading these things and going to witness interviews. And we did some security litigation. So I was pretty much in charge of managing the trove of millions of documents, which at the time was a lot of data, but it was all in CDs. So
Right.
categorizing how to find certain things. And so by the end of those 2 years, I knew that I would be going to law school. I thought it was a blast. Um, but then, came along some naysayers, and you're not mean enough to go to law school. You're not confrontational enough to go to law
Yeah.
school.
Mhm.
And I have found that that doesn't matter. The best lawyers that I have worked with are really good people who are empathetic, and they're able to put themselves in the shoes of their opponent, whether it's someone they're deposing or the opposing counsel.
Yep.
And y- you know what I also loved about going ahead and paying that, committing to the tuition of law school is there's so much you can do with that degree. I mean, people think it's by nature adversarial, but there are a lot of collaborative things you can do. And now there's a lot of tech things you can do. And if
Yep.
you're really interested in languages and culture, you can go into international arbitration. So I just, I kind of opened my mind to what a law degree can do for you, which is
Yeah. Yeah.
limitless.
I
Mhm,
always felt like the same way. It kind of gave you, it accelerated my career path in the sense that it gave me a seat at the table. It distinguished me from other
mhm.
people. So I found that I had quicker access, frankly, to like a boardroom.
Yeah.
I was a general counsel of a publicly traded company when I was 30 years old, and and had access to boardrooms before that when I was working at a big firm, and we would work on big projects. And so I don't know that at that age I would have had those opportunities if I was, in sales or marketing or some other sort of, discipline. And so, um, it did for me kind of open some doors that I think might not have otherwise been open earlier in my career. And it gave me a path too, because I've always enjoyed business. And
Mhm.
so as the GC, my expertise is legal, but a lot of times I'm providing business advice. And so that's, for me, what I really enjoyed about it is because I could kind of, while I'm a lawyer, I'm also, I'm doing things that excite me and that are interesting to me, which, for me is business in general. So I agree with you. I think it opens a lot of doors that you might not otherwise think from a traditional
Right.
career path as a lawyer.
Yeah, and the skills apply. I mean, it's strategy, it's psychology. I mean, I'm sure if you're on the business side of things, so much of it turns into just a psychology experiment,
Yeah, I mean, and
trying
you're
to predict what other people are going to do next, or what their objectives are, what they want, or how to reach the right, most efficient solution to a problem.
yeah, I mean, whether it's a legal issue, it's a business issue, it's a sales issue, marketing. I mean, at the end of the day, you're making a decision. You're trying to understand what the problem is. You're trying to, make the best possible decision. You can't eliminate risk. You can just sort of manage it. And so you're just, it's a constant, process in whatever discipline you're in of trying to understand the situation that you're in and make the best
Mhm.
possible decision with the information you have at that time. And so, I think as unexciting as it probably is, like you talked about the tradition from being the transition from being an English major to a lawyer,
Mhm.
that type of thinking of get to the point, understand the issues quickly, and be able to try to identify the best possible solution and then move forward with that. Law school really does a good job of preparing you to make those kinds of decisions.
It does, and there's skills for every part of your life. I mean, now we have social media feeds, and there's so much news coming at us, and you have to figure out how to distill what's really the important truth in the news, or what to read, or what to introduce in conversations with whoever you're working with.
Mhm.
It really helps to kind of parse out what is worth talking about, what's worth learning about, and kind of not get distracted by some of the red herrings out there that we learn about. You might go down some rabbit holes thinking that something might be critical to your case, and then
Yeah.
later on find down the line that it was just a waste of time. So you'd learn how to look for what's really going to matter.
Yeah. Well, let me skip ahead to I'm gonna come back to you end up to you going to law school, but you touched on something that I think is interesting, and I've asked other people this question. I suspect you may have a similar sort of opinion, but can you be a nice person and be a lawyer? I think that I I mean, I'm curious. I think you absolutely can. I think there's the most in my career, 25 years as a lawyer, the most effective lawyers are the ones that are kind, that are ethical, that do things, you know, in a personable way. I think that's a more effective strategy than the Pitbull nasty lawyers who, in my experience, haven't been that strategy is not as effective.
That is absolutely what I have observed, because sometimes, if you are known as one of the best bulldogs in town, you might also be known as someone who loses their cool, especially under pressure. And that may be something that a jury doesn't like if you're before them, or it might be something the bench doesn't like, or it may just be something that opposing counsel becomes so reluctant to cooperate with you that your chances of mediation or settlement that might actually be truly beneficial for the client and save them a lot of money, then it takes longer to get to that point
Yeah.
because of how the matter is approached. So I do certainly think that being a good person is a good asset.
Yeah, no, I do too, and I think sort of that Pitbull mentality, that sort of overly confident, sort of aggressive approach can backfire so many times, and ultimately, those types of attorneys, I sort of feel the same. Like they tend to take all the energy out of the room, and it becomes more about them than it does the actual sort of situation you're trying to deal with. That may be that
Yeah,
their interests of the attorney are not aligned with the interests of the client.
that's right. And I think, there are sanctionable instances of lawyer conduct that could really also backfire. And you have to think about what are the rules for the good faith and the ethics of how you approach a situation. Because let's say in my world, which is discovery, and we're having a discovery dispute, and the other side just wants to move to compel without meeting and conferring about what's the right path to take or how to narrow a request. A lot of the time I found that the judges just are frustrated by the waste of their time, that, we certainly could have resolved this amongst ourselves if we had just had an open line of communication. So I think that can absolutely backfire. That being said, I think if you're not a pit bull, it doesn't mean that you should let people walk all over you. I mean, this is a profession where I think boundaries are tested constantly, and you have to still know who you are, be steadfast, stand up for yourself, be confident about what you know. Um, I think the best lawyer is not the lawyer who knows everything, because if that lawyer thinks he knows everything, he's wrong. And
Mhm.
so it's already a problem. I think the best lawyers know that they don't know everything, and they're a good architect or captain, and can kind of corral together the components of a team that will really get to the best outcome. And some of that means, like, you might have a more assertive person, and then you might have a person who's doing all the data analysis behind the scenes, or doing all of the database building, or deploying all the new technology tools, and it all kind of comes together to achieve your best outcome.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it is something I liked what you said about, you're kind of being challenged constantly, boundaries are being challenged. I mean, it's a constant sort of push and
Mhm,
pull, but, there's a difference between being confident in your position, and being assertive, and being, just a jerk about things, and
mhm,
constantly sort of pounding the table and screaming and yelling and being sort of an emotional, you know, wreck, if you will.
mhm.
Which, to me, it's you understand if you are intelligent about your case, you understand the facts, you understand what the pros of your case are. More importantly, you understand what the difficulties of your case are, and you're able to corral arguments in advance. The more prepared person, in my opinion, typically wins. And that's more about being thoughtful and understanding your case and knowing kind of what the weak spot. Every case has weak spots, and
Mhm.
thinking all those things through in advance to me is a way better strategy than just pounding the table constantly.
That's really well said because I think courts see that confidence, and I think otherwise some of that kind of more bombastic attitude looked like smoke and mirrors. And if you are having to resort to smoke and mirrors, then is your case flimsy? I mean, that's where the brain goes. So
Yeah.
I think that was absolutely right.
Yeah, and I think that willingness to meet with the other side and be
Mhm.
professional about it, like you said, in discovery, we're both kind of in that world. And so judges want to see that you're trying to work this out amongst yourselves. They want to see that you're setting meetings, you're talking through these issues, you're having thoughtful dialogue on it. If you can't work it out yourselves, I'm here and I will make a decision for you, but you're going
Mhm.
to be better off, I think, trying to meet and confer and understand early in your case how this is going to go. Those tend to be the best cases and the best outcomes for clients, even though, obviously it's an emotion, in most cases, it's an emotional issue. You're like, why are you talking to the other side? Why are you giving them a continuance? Why are
Mhm.
you, I don't want to give over my cell phone data. Why are you agreeing to do this, that, the other thing? It can be difficult for clients to understand those discussions. But ultimately, the people that have, as I always call it, like have done the dance before,
Mhm.
understand the repercussions of being obstinate and not working and cooperating with the other side early in the process. So
That's right. And it goes both ways that, we're not saying that means to attend this meet and confer and then capitulate and
yeah,
agree to just turn over everything. It also means that if you're on the other side requesting information, are you reasonable in your request? Have you narrowed your scope to what is likely to provide admissible information? I mean, you can't just go in and ask for everybody's cell phones if there's no need for that, but maybe you could ask for a certain window of text between a certain number of people or certain Slack channels or whatever the case may be. Like, be strategic in what you're asking for, because otherwise, if you reach impasse and it goes to the court, they'll think, well, why are you asking for all this? And you'll be
yeah,
in just as much trouble. So,
yeah. And
and
so,
what's
and oh, go
mhm.
ahead. No, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just going to say another interesting thing about being in discovery is that you end up taking both uh, polar positions at different times in practice.
Mm,
One of the hot issues we have right now is modern attachments and documents that link to other documents elsewhere, whether it's in a document management system or, um, even the internet. And so I've been on the side of, what do you mean we can't have your linked attachments? That is critical to the document. Part of the document. It's
yeah,
something we need to examine you on. But then I've been on the side of, what do you should pull all our attachments? That's unduly burdensome and disproportional. And if you have a few you want, then meet and confer with me, and I might give you those one or two. And then I've
yep,
argued, and my strategy for your deposition. My strategy for motion for summary judgment. So
yep.
it is really funny that when you're in this world, you sometimes take a position that's completely contradictory to the position you took the day before. But
Oh,
that's because it depends on the facts. And both times you were probably right.
that's exactly right. And it's that process has. I mean, I did that when I started that process when I was in law school, and I did moot court, right? You have to be prepared because at
Mhm.
like minutes before you walk up there, you don't know whether you're on the plaintiff side or the defense side, and you got to be able to argue
Mhm.
both sides. And as a corporate lawyer, I can't tell you how many times I've made arguments negotiating a merger, and you're arguing. If you're on the buyer side, you're going to make these arguments, or if you're on the seller side, you're going to make these arguments. You can, and the arguments that the other side's going to make before you even say it. But you
Mhm.
have to go through that dance. But as a lawyer, that's one of the interesting things. You have to be able to argue both sides.
Ye
And that can be an interesting sort of thing sometimes, especially
Mhm.
if you're being given direction by your client and you know that that's probably not the right thing to do, but
Mhm.
it happens. Real quick, I want to recognize our sponsor, Array. Array handles all the details of litigation so that you can focus on winning your case. They take care of forensic collection, e-discovery, managed review, record retrieval, court reporting, legal staffing and recruiting, trial support, you name it. I'm the general counsel at Array, so I may be a little bit biased, but I was also a client before I started working there too. I've used them on various matters, and they've always delivered. If you're involved in a lawsuit, make Array your first call, and they'll help you get organized right from the beginning. You can reach out to me or visit trustarray.com. Now, back to the pod. You finished Duke. You end up at Emory. You're not the first
Yes.
attorney on the show, by the way, from Emory.
Oh, didn't realize.
Yeah, Al Chakravarty was one of my early interviews on the podcast, and Al is an attorney at Snell and Wilmer. He was previously a U.S. attorney or assistant U.S. attorney. He prosecuted the Boston Marathon bomber
Mhm.
when he was in Boston, and a really interesting story. But he also went to Emory University for law school. So tell us about going to school there for at Emory for law school.
Sure. I mean, at that point, I'd been working at the firm in Atlanta for a couple of years, so I was familiar with Emory just being a good school. But one thing that I think a lot of listeners might, if they go to law school and have taken the bar course for the bar exam, one of the kind of nationally known guys who teaches the CIF Pro there is Richard Freer. And he's also cited in a lot of Instagram accounts because he's just a very charismatic person, kind of the type of person that you would make a movie about law school and feature a star, portraying him. He's going to be the dean at Emory starting this July. And
Oh,
I
wow.
couldn't believe I got him for Civ Pro just by luck of the draw. And, on top of my legal writing professor who told me to cut the chaff, I remember him saying, and I can talk about this because he had said it in multiple places. Why would you ever say at this particular point in time when you can just say now? This is what I think now. And so, I mean, it's funny what sticks with you 20 years later.
Yeah,
But we had a good time. Um, and so after Emory, it was basically the question for me of whether to stay in the South with my practice or whether to come back to Illinois, where I came from, and try to build in Chicago. And so,
Mhm.
Emory was a wonderful place where I felt like I could take that law degree to any region. Some
Right.
schools are,
Yeah.
they're very good at putting you in connection with people in the city they're in, and that sometimes can be even more valuable. But I definitely wanted to go to a law school where I could take my career wherever the world would take me.
Yeah. Yeah. I went to
Mhm.
KU, and it was more regional. I mean, there weren't a lot of opportunities outside of Kansas City, Topeka, kind of the Kansas area. The few firms in Chicago, only one in Phoenix, where I ended up at Snell and Wilmer. But um, my
But there
roommate
are. I mean,
here,
look at you now. I mean, it's
yeah,
a
I
great
know.
school. Yeah,
I know
big
it sort
fan.
of
Yeah.
ended up, but my roommate,
Mhm.
when I was in the summer program here at Snell, went to Georgetown, and he had opportunity. He could kind of choose Phoenix. I kind of landed here, but he had opportunities kind of throughout the country. Similar with Emory, I think the network and the reputation of the school kind of lends itself where you can really kind of have a lot of opportunity. I think to choose where you want to go when you're done. It's a great school.
But but at the same time, I mean, some of the best lawyers come from a smaller school or a less well known school. I mean, it's really about who you are and what you bring to the table, and I think what kind of person you are. So, I mean, if you're dedicated to being your best, I mean, you're going to go places. And if you come out of a top school, and you think that that entitles you to a certain kind of opportunity, then you're probably not going to go places because you have to put in the work and just
Yep.
as hard as everybody else.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think you may have more opportunities at some of the bigger schools, and then but then once that opportunity presents itself, you can only pick one job, and then it's from
Hmm.
there, it's kind of what you do with the opportunity once it's presented to you, and you kind of start from scratch all the way at the bottom, and you got to work your way up. And so I think at that point, then it is more like you say about who you are and how much um energy and time and effort you kind of put into your opportunity that you get. So I couldn't agree with you more. And I said that's
Yeah,
from a
I think
guy
both.
that went to a non-prestigious school, so
It's a great school, and I think that um, that's part of it. Is I think people are looking for folks who work hard, and that can come from anywhere. And some of the good schools, they might be, you might come across folks who have worked really hard their whole life to get there. But you have to be able to, identify who's genuine about um, being a hard worker,
Yeah. Yeah.
because that's not always the case at those places. So
No,
never.
it's definitely not. So, okay, so
Mm-mm.
you finish at Emory, you end up in Chicago. So what was your practice like where did you start then and kind of what was your practice like when you first started practicing?
So when I first started was in Georgia, and I was at a smaller firm that actually let me try on a bunch of different things. A lot of them did not use a lot of discovery. So, for example, when I did a little bit of trust and estates and realized like how that became the foundation of the worst lawsuits, because there's nothing like litigation between family members or family companies. I mean, that
Yeah.
is definitely a whole nother world. And I got to try out a little bit of business formation and dissolution, and that also ended up being really important information in litigation.
Mm,
And even some family law where you realize like, okay, this is someone's life that you're holding in your hands, and you want to do the best possible job for your client, because there's a face to them every day. It's not just, oh, a big company, are they going to make more money or less money? This is someone's life. So that was a really good experience as an associate there. But then when I came to Chicago is when I started working more on the discovery side of things, almost by accident, because I think that a lot of the times young lawyers dread doc review, and that's kind of the last thing they want to do. And it feels like it's going to be less exciting than, I want to take a deposition right now. And whereas for me, I thought, okay, well, this is the sleuthing part. This is the most fun. Like, I wanted to be the person that is kind of living in the documents. And that way, when, as a young lawyer, if a partner came to the team and said, gosh, to prove this element of our claim, I really wish we had a document that showed this, I would feel like, okay, I'm the person who knows how to find that, not only based on knowing searching techniques, but based on living in the documents, knowing who's more likely to send that document, what kind of document are they likely to send, when would they have done it, who would they have sent it to. So there's a real benefit to kind of being the person who knows those personalities inside out. You almost feel like when you're in discovery that you are a part of that world that you're exploring, and
yeah.
that's why you're a good resource for your whole team when it comes time to summary judgment or trial. So, I mean, I think the role of a good discovery lawyer isn't just at the preservation, collection, and production part. It's also at the presentation part. I mean, you get to be a part of that process and that delivery and kind of getting things to the finish line.
That's really interesting, and I hadn't thought of it in those terms before, but you're exactly right. I mean, you could take a case that probably on the face of it you think, "Ah, we don't have a chance," but then you get into discovery, and if you can find that nugget in there,
Mhm.
you can turn your entire case around. The sleuthing part of it is, that's really interesting. So, is that kinda where you kinda started to then navigate more into the discovery world, e-discovery, and took that up as kind of an
Absolutely.
expert? Yeah. Mm,
Yeah, I was at a larger firm at the time, but part of the small group of people that was living in the document. And that turned into, I mean, look at me, I get really excited. And when you meet other nerds who like the same things as you do, you get excited about it, talk about it.
yeah.
And it turned into, oh, hey, we're having this other big matter where we need to manage a review with contract attorneys. Like, Jen's obviously the most excited about this. Let's
Yeah.
throw her on that. And so one managed review led to another managed review, led to, designing the protocols. And then, yeah, it got to the point where the technology was evolving, and it helped to have someone um, within the department that was familiar in the different platforms. Um, and our industry changes year to year. And so it's kind of good to have someone around who pays attention to those changes, and what the pitfalls are. And I think discovery, a lot of people look at it a little bit reactively, like, oh no, we got these requests on us. How are we going to respond? When you really have to be proactive and have someone from the very beginning looking at what are we going to negotiate in our ESI protocol so that down the line we're not in trouble with what we're
Yeah.
supposed to what we've agreed to do, what we haven't agreed to do. If we refuse to do something, are we going to be blocked from trying to do it to the other side in terms of obtaining whether it's a phone or um, other types of data? So yeah, I would say I've been linked to things as part of caring about it.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic,
Mhm.
and obviously people that like what they do and care about what they do are just more effective. It's just, I mean, and having that experience is just absolutely critical because you can look at a case, even though it's brand new, it just hits your desk, you're trying to think, but you've been down this path a million times, so you know what's going to be important um, down the road and how to set things up in advance. So give us a little bit of what's your tips? Like what's a good project? Something hits your desk. What's the what are you looking at the front end? What are you trying to sort of get your arms around, and what what makes a good e-discovery sort of project for someone?
Sure. I mean, so definitely you want to plan at the front end and think about what are the most important issues you're looking for, but you have to be flexible because you might find document on a couple hours into your analysis that totally changes what you're looking for. So I would say open communication, a clear protocol of what you're looking for, because sometimes I think teams might want to just throw bodies like, hey, we have 20,000 documents and we have a deposition in 2 days. Everybody take X hundred documents and review them linearly. And that's definitely not going to be the most efficient way to do something. I think, first you bring in a discovery person who can run some analytics, weed out things that nobody has to look at that are clearly irrelevant. Um, and, ideally in today's world, you're probably dealing with an active learning system of some kind with machine learning, and you can turn that on to help you prioritize your review as you go. You don't lose as much time doing kind of the old fashioned TAR 1.0 seed sets. We've kind of moved into an area where every coding decision you make can help inform how the machine reads your documents and kind of prioritizes and feeds for you the most important things. So so I'd say, from the very beginning, make sure that you're deploying the tools at your disposal. Make sure you have the right people involved who know how to use those tools, and be strategic. Don't be linear. Think about who are the custodians you have, what time period is going to be the most important. Maybe instead of dividing things evenly, you start with a certain month. Like, that month is going to be the most important month. Let's look at those. Maybe think about what keywords to deploy first and be smart about not using words that result in false hits. So I think if you combine all of these different strategies and have someone who's supervising them to make sure that they're not running into each other, um, then you'll probably be able to get your hands around things pretty quickly. I mean, for us, that happens a lot where because we're a litigation boutique, we sometimes get brought into a matter midstream the week before depositions or the month before fact discovery closes, or we get brought in for a big bankruptcy restructuring, which, I've heard people call that the Wild West because all the rules are different and you only have a couple days to prepare things. And so these are the kind of things that we think about as far as how to get to the most important information
Yep.
quickly.
Is it fair to say discovery is a little bit art and a little bit science? Because I think some of this, like you said, depending on the particular case and understanding kind of the direction it's going to go, you might approach it a little differently from one case to the other, knowing kind of having been down that road and kind of understanding. So um, I think some people, think about discovery the way you kind of described it before. It's like, oh, we got a request for all this sort of stuff, and then how are we going to get our arms around this and get it out as efficiently as possible? But
Mhm.
some cases, you may want to attack things a little bit differently, just depending on the particular situation that you're in.
Right. And even if depending on when you get involved in the case, whether it was at the beginning or midstream, what kind of litigation hold was put in place? Did it go to the right people? Did it only go to the people, involved in the day to day facts, or did it go to the IT person who's responsible for the automatic data deletion settings? There are a lot of things that you can ask early on in the process to make sure that you have a smoother outcome later on. And I think another thing that's important is not just focusing on what's in front of you, custodians, words, date ranges, but what do you not have? I mean, I've been in situations where we identify that there are gaps from custodians or gaps in timelines. And it turns out, very many times there's been some sort of data collection mistake and a time period was just missed and needed to be supplemented. And, these are things you need to watch out for because if you never catch them, all those documents might have not been a part of your analysis. So,
Yeah.
or maybe it's because somebody's purposely withholding them and you have to send a deficiency letter and try to get your hands on those things. So think about what you have, but really think about what you don't have.
That's really good. Well said. What types of technology are you using today, and what sort of technology is coming, down the road that you are looking forward to using? Like the way we handle discovery is so different today, but kind of tell us a
Yeah,
little bit of kind of how you handle that.
sure. Well, it's not just about document review anymore. It's not just about what platform you use for responsiveness and privilege reviews. I mean, yes, I touched on, when we first had TAR 1.0 and lawyers would use technology by having a subject matter expert review a prevalence sample and trying to train the machine. And then folks would kind of review documents based on the scores received. Now we've kind of moved into the TAR 2.0 where, um, we use the predictive coding from the beginning to the end. Every click makes part of that decision. But, you know, we're also talking about now generative AI, of course, and whether you can feasibly feed documents into the machine and then have it spit out summaries or identify the key documents for you. And I think there's a lot of trepidation about that. Folks are concerned about whether the model is sufficiently secure. Data privacy is a big thing.
Yeah.
But I think that those tools are very strong and they're rigorously tested. And I think the important thing is that the right person is kind of using those tools. And there are several of them out there. So you need to kind of compare what's out there and see what is going to give you the best output for what your cost is. But there's also technology for what do you do with your depositions and your exhibits and syncing the deposition videos. Because now in a post pandemic world, people are accustomed to doing a lot of the depositions virtually because then you can reach state to state. And so syncing those videos can be really important. You want to make sure you have someone who knows how to get to the best part of the testimony properly, quickly. And then trial presentation
Yep.
technology.
Whole
So
other.
every
Yep.
every stage of the process, you have to
Yeah.
think about what is the best technology for me today.
Yeah. And I think, like, to me, the law is so slow, and to adopt change and to adopt new technology. Um, I think in my mind that creates opportunity for people like you who understand technology, understand law, can speak both languages, and can help, maybe some of the older attorneys understand how this can help you with your case, and it's not something to be afraid of. Do you see resistance, like, to people being willing to use this technology?
Absolutely. But I think that because it is changing so quickly, I think there is an awareness that this is coming whether we like it or not. So we have to adapt. And even if that means, you know, I do not want to learn these things. I know that I want to bring someone onto my team who is going to learn those things, and make sure to, we have a duty of competence, right? That's in the model rules of professional conduct. Like
Yeah.
we have to, if we don't have this technology mastered, you are required to bring somebody along who can provide that expertise for you because otherwise perhaps you are shortchanging your client because they're entitled to the information that's out there and they need their lawyers to know how to go get it.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, and I think you just can't, put your head in the sand and say, "I've been practicing this way for 30 years. I'm really good at it. This is what I'm gonna do," because the technology is evolving so fast, and I think it does give the other side a huge strategic advantage if they're taking advantage of these tools and the other side's not. I just don't think there's any way you can, uh, have an equal fight, if you're not gonna leverage the resources that are available today.
And clients are going to see where are they spending more. If they're going to go to a firm that puts an army of associates on a linear review, they're going to spend millions of dollars over time more than if they go somewhere that is deploying their good technology. And that's how a lot of smaller firms, we're a boutique. We are
Yep.
out there on cases with big firms all the time. And sometimes they actually have us handle a lot more of this discovery side because we have folks that are dedicated to knowing how to do it efficiently. And so that's actually been a really good thing for us,
Yep.
without a doubt.
No, I
Mhm.
think so too, and I think, to me, like, the strategic advantages for big firms versus smaller firms is that gap is closing really rapidly as well, where, the access to information, clients understand, "Why am I paying these rates?" I could work with MoloLamken and get just as good, and
Mhm.
so, I don't know what your rates are, but, like, the bigger firms out there, the access to technology, leveraging that technology, being really strategic about it, being efficient in the way you sort of prepare your case and go about it, gives smaller firms an advantage. I see it in the corporate space, and I know there's like some smaller firms out there that are really going after small and medium sized businesses for corporate advice, where um, you know uh, people are starting firms. They may have worked for a Gibson Dunn or a Kirkland and Ellis, starting in their career, but they've left those bigger firms, and now they're a smaller practice. They have this sort of the benefit of the experience at the bigger firm and how the steps are done in the dance for a corporate transaction, but they're leveraging technology and doing it much more efficiently. And small and medium sized businesses are getting that just as good, the kind of the expertise of a bigger firm, but they're getting it at a smaller firm rate. So I think those same things play out in the litigation, in all areas of law. But you've got to be willing to be open to new ideas and new technology, and then put in that time and effort to learn about those things, or bring someone like yourself in that does understand that. So
Yeah, and there's there's a lot to think about when you see emerging trends of how people are doing things nowadays versus how I always did things for so many years and I'm not changing my ways. It's not just about outsourcing to maybe someone who's really good on the tech and science side who will know how to deploy whatever is the trending technology. You also, at the end of the day, we're also still legal advocates who have to be familiar with the rules. And if you're in a jurisdiction that requires you to disclose that you've used any type of artificial intelligence in the aftermath of Avianca and people using hallucinated cases, you need to know to do that. And if you're in another jurisdiction that requires a categorical privilege log, unless you convert otherwise or stipulated otherwise, I mean there's still a lot of um kind of guidelines and requirements in place that you have to be familiar with. And if you don't know them for all the states, which no one probably can, you know to look for them and you know where to look for them, to make sure that what you're doing is always defensible. I mean, we want to do what's ethical and what's defensible.
yeah. So a little bit of a sort of transition then. To me, I see nothing but huge amounts of opportunity in the legal industry for tech and for people that understand this. So, like, what advice do you have for young attorneys, law students, people interested in getting into law? Is this an
Mhm.
area that you obviously you're excited about it? I'm setting you up on this one.
Mhm.
You could just tell
Mhm.
it comes through, right? You're very, you seem to enjoy what you do, and you're very excited about it. I mean, is this an area of law that you would, encourage people to learn about and develop a career in?
I mean, it's growing fast. So yes, I mean, I think it's a lot of fun. You meet great people, and you can make your career what you want it to be. If you prefer to be more tech, if you prefer to be more people facing, like I said, I'm not confrontational. I don't want to go and argue, but I certainly like to come up with arguments with the documents behind the
Yep.
scenes.
Yep.
Um, I think for young lawyers, what's important is look at where there's a need. So maybe there you have a lot of people on securities, but not a lot of people in health insurance. Look at where the needs are and put in the research to kind of become someone who knows a lot about where that need is. I've seen friends do this in a variety of different practice areas. And when you develop some sort of an expertise that other people don't have, immediately become an asset, of course, and that type of knowledge is indispensable. But if you're just starting out and you don't really know how to pick that practice area or where to dip a toe in, I have found it really useful to follow thought leaders in the spaces that I'm interested in, and whether that's, I mean, originally I didn't use LinkedIn a ton when it first came out, and now I love so many of the articles that I have been able to see there, and I've made contacts there that are people that I then see at conferences, and we exchange ideas and thoughts and plans and strategies, and it is really worthwhile to follow thought leaders in your space and see what is the buzz about, what are people talking about from week to week and month to month, as what is evolving in the practice area you're interested in. And also, I mean, I know people will say, go to your bar association events, but that's kind of, those can be really big events, and those might be people, you don't see again very often. I mean, I think it's still worth going. That's good advice that people are receiving. But I say find organizations that might also be um, more tailored to what you have an interest in. So in my case, ASEDS is a great organization, and we have chapters in so many cities throughout the country. Association of Certified E-Discovery Specialists. You don't have to have taken the ASEDS exam to, participate, go to their webinars and events. Um, Here, we also have various chapters of women in e-discovery. I mean, there are definitely places out there to expand your network and learn more about what you like.
Yeah. And I think like participating in those things and meeting the people, understanding better what it is, like you gotta find something that you're passionate about. I think just getting a job and making money is not gonna lead to a successful career or a satisfying career, I guess. You gotta be interested in what you're doing. It worked for me when I was a summer associate at Snell, and I thought I was gonna be a litigator, but when I was there for that summer, I really, I got to understand what a corporate lawyer does. I got to meet the people in the practice group. I really enjoyed working with them. I really enjoyed business. It all kind of came together for me at that point. And, I worked there for 5 years and worked on a million transactions. And then I was able to transition into in-house where I've spent my career since then. And I really enjoy being part of a team. I know that I grew up playing baseball. I wanted to be part of a team. Like, I didn't like the individual sort of aspect of being a lawyer, and so that team environment, the business, that type of stuff, and I think, putting yourself out there and sort of going to these types of events and meeting the people that are there and really learning about what they do is such a great way to
Mhm.
sort of find your area, the thing that interests you. Obviously, like I love the way you put it with, the sleuthing aspect of it. And there was a whole element as I hear you talk about really kind of like self-discovery. Like what is it that
Mhm.
interests you? What motivates you? So I think finding that early in your career and pursuing something that you're interested in is so important. Because if you just sort of pursue something that's financially motivated but doesn't really interest you, I think you're gonna find yourself 10 years into your career and being like, "What did I do? Why did I do this?"
And then you're giving interviews to young folks thinking about going to college and telling them not to do what you did,
Yeah,
like the
right.
person who told me not to go to law school. So I'd say
I
by all means, then change course, because life is short and we have to spend so many of our lives at our jobs. So we might as well enjoy it. And I think for me, the best part of my job has been the teams that I've been on. And, I'm someone that I like to collaborate, but then I also like to go lose myself in data by myself for a few hours. So I get to do, both sides of that. And so I think to the folks out there, that is possible. You can want both things.
Yeah, and I think to somebody on the surface, they might say, "Oh, e-discovery, like, what the heck?" Like, I don't but, the way you've described it, you kinda personalize it and you kinda want I could see someone not knowing anything about discovery, not knowing anything about law, not or thinking that they wanna be, Mitch McDear like I did from The Firm, and John Grisham novels. But then talking to you and going, "Wow, you know what? That actually the way you described it, like, that kinda describes me. I kinda like that too." Like, I don't wanna be the one that's up there. Some people might be wanna be like, "I wanna be the one that's the, first chair, picking a
Mhm.
jury, making the arguments." Other people are like, "No, I like where I could really shine is in the back room. Just give me access to this data and let me go through, and I'm gonna give you some really good nuggets that are gonna help the case." And so, knowing who you are as a person, I think, is really important, to building a successful career. You've certainly done that, seems like.
Oh, thanks. I mean, I have found it very rewarding and a lot of fun. And even when I talk about going to these industry events, I think that when I was coming up at college, I thought, wow, that sounds like such a drag. You have to be on and, try to say the right things. And I found I don't do that. I just go and I'm myself and we have a great time. And it's inspiring to know that, this profession has a lot of great people in it. And um, whoever you are, whatever you're into, there's somebody out there that will probably can connect with you, and there's a yin to every yang. So
Yeah.
I feel like I found mine. And if anyone ever wants to reach out to me to talk about things, I'm on LinkedIn and, we could
Yep.
take it from there.
And LinkedIn is a great resource too. Like, I'm with you. Like, I used it for so long just as a kind of a place to just kind of store your resume.
Hmm.
People are really leveraging LinkedIn now and putting out great content. And I think it's a place that people are finding more acceptable to discuss, to kind of blend a little bit of your sort of professional life and your personal life, which, they're really using sort of the full benefits of the kind of like social part of the social media. Um, so I would encourage people to do the same thing, leverage LinkedIn. It's technology and there's a great opportunity on there to learn and to meet other people. And I don't think people use it quite, take full advantage of it, I guess, as much as they should.
Right. I'm surprised how useful it has become because you don't want to participate in something that's just, oh, patting themselves on the back or people patting each other on the back. So
Yep.
what you're looking for is people who kind of like what we've discussed are passionate about what they're doing and they actually care about growing knowledge about that, sharing knowledge about that, and finding like-minded folks who care about discussing these developments. So in the past, I might have chosen certain legal publications to keep up with or certain CLE providers to use for continuing legal education. And now, things are moving too fast. You can't just rely on your annual CLE to try to learn what's changing out there.
Mhm.
Um, but the good thing about social media or LinkedIn is you find out about new publications that may not have existed 6 months ago. And they're suddenly, breaking barriers in terms of reporting on what are the hot new cases and decisions that are coming out. And that way, if something comes up in one of your, this has happened to me already too, where a question will come up. What do we do in this scenario? And I think, well, I just read about a case and this is what they're doing in this jurisdiction. And let's, it's probably so many of these issues are of first impression right now. So there might not be any law in your jurisdiction and you're going to have to look at what's being done elsewhere, identify those patterns, and we might be creating the precedent in our jurisdictions. So it's
Yeah.
a fun spot to be in.
Yeah. And you can, I think before kind of the advent of social media and this technology, you might be, you might have something in your mind that you're thinking about, like, oh, I read about that case, or I heard something about it in a, in the bar journal. And then, 6 months from now, you might go to an industry event and be able to collaborate and sort of, discuss what's going on. Now everything happens virtually in real time. So you can have
Mhm.
that case where somebody, cites made up cases, the AI, hallucinates, and boom, immediately full blown discussion on LinkedIn or wherever you're sort of, sharing information with one another. And I think that some people are very resistant to some of that stuff. And they're like, oh, like, I'm not into social media. I don't mess around with any of that stuff. But you're kind of missing out on really good information, access to information, and then people's thoughts on
Yeah.
that event, and then also just meeting people and getting to know people in your industry. At Grand Canyon, going off on a tangent here. At Grand Canyon, we had a huge online program, and we found that a lot of the students on the online programs were closer than the students that were actually on the traditional campus. They would meet at
Oh,
the graduation ceremonies. They'd get together for, doctoral programs. They'd have to meet periodically, but they're leveraging technology and they're emailing each other and they're having these really sort of rich, robust discussions online. And then when they meet in person, it's just, they just sort of enhance that sort of relationship that they built online. So I think leveraging these, things like LinkedIn to help meet people in the industry, discover, I think is just all good. And I think it's a
yeah,
positive thing. Um,
let it out.
I'll get off my
Mhm.
high horse there. I'm preaching.
Mhm. At least I agree with you.
Yeah,
No
well,
argument.
that's true.
Uh-huh.
Well, I think we've kind of hit the times. Have we not covered? Well, I sent an outline just to be I sent an outline in advance to Jen, and it's like, I had so many things that I wanted to cover with you, but I think we've hit an hour already, and I haven't sort of covered half of what I wanted to talk about. Did we miss anything that we really should touch base about, though, before we leave?
I mean, hey, I can always come back, dun, to be continued. But no, I mean, I think it was actually better that we discussed this organically because that's what the practice of law is taking things as they come and seeing how it changes. So,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it's a good time.
Yeah. I agree. This is sort of the whole concept of the show is like, I love these conversations. You go to lunch with someone or you're meeting in the attorney lounge and you have these conversations and you just never know where it's going to go. And I think now in a virtual world where we work from home, a lot of people schedule meetings. They get on, they talk about the substance of their particular thing, but then they log off and they don't have this sort of water cooler, off the cuff sort of conversation that I just think is really helpful to have. So I appreciate you sharing your story and some of your thoughts. And I may have to have you back on the show because we got a lot more to talk about, I think. So
That sounds great. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
no, thank you. All right. Well, thanks for everybody for tuning in. Appreciate you listening to the show. Jen Doran, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to Array who sponsors the show and makes this possible. Please tune into YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast for future episodes, which we'll definitely have to include Jen in part 2 at some point down the road. Jen, thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.